Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Well, good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack, the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. This is going to be an interesting Encounter episode because in my memory, we have never had biblical scholars on with us. And one of the great things that comes along with having to do things a little bit differently, where we're not going into the station to do our recording, is that distance doesn't become such a big issue, and you can bring in people from all over the country, and folks that I've known for a while and respected their work are available to us in this kind of environment. One of my thoughts was that we whenever I'm talking with people about the milieu or the social area that we're in right now, one of the things that keeps coming up is a linkage to the book of Revelation. Everyone's asking, is this a sign or a some kind of seal being broken where pestilence and plagues come upon us? When we start reading about wasps that are coming in that are 2 inches long, or an asteroid that is about to hit coming very close to the Earth, one of the thoughts becomes, is this Revelation? And in some ways, I think we tend toward the apocalypse as a way of kind of making sense at times of where we are within these emerging situations that come out. So I invited a couple of my friends, Rich Eckley, who is a long-standing friend of mine, going back to college years. I can't believe that I was in one of his first classes he taught at United Wesleyan College way back when. And Rich has been a long-standing friend of mine. I've used him as a reference for many, many years on my resume. He actually helped me get the job here at the Council of Churches. So Rich Eckley is the professor of theology at Houghton College. He's I think you're near retirement. Is that correct, Rich?
That's right.
And
it's time to retire.
and the other person that I have on today, his name is Mitchell Reddish. He is the O. Lafayette Walker Professor of Christian Studies and Chair of Department of Religion at Stetson University. Now, Stetson is where I go to pastor school almost every January, and Mitchell is the actual organizer for one of the organizers for the event itself. And so Mitchell has agreed to be on to talk about Revelation with us. So welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Let's just kick this off by asking the question. One of the things that happens to me with great regularity is when I go into a church and they and Revelation happens to be on the lectionary when it comes up. A lot of people begin asking the question, well, why do we read this book? Because it's one of those things that kind of either one of the reactions is, well, why don't we just get rid of it? And the other reaction is to take it overly seriously as if it's the central part of the corpus of religious life. So why would you study Revelation, I guess is the question.
I'll attempt an answer for that one. I grew up never being familiar with the book of Revelation. Grew up in the church, but in my church tradition, I don't know that I ever heard a sermon off the book of Revelation. It was really when I was in seminary and took a course on the book of Revelation that I really got interested in the book. To a large extent because of the imagination of the writer of the book of Revelation. I was hooked by the images and the literary skill of the writer. But even more than that is the overarching message of hope that's in the book of Revelation. And so for me, particularly in the kind of situation in which we find ourselves now, the strong message of hope and comfort that is in the book of Revelation provides a good reason for people to be reading the book.
And Rich, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess my experience would have been very different. I grew up in a church where, like Joe was saying, I think they were a bit more obsessed with it. And I can remember as a child, evangelists coming in with these long panels that they would put in front of the church. I've now discovered that these artistic panels are worth a lot of money, these dispensational charts.
Yeah.
But we would go through a 10-day, 10-night revival series with each night covering a different block of the Revelation. And I was not taught that it was a hopeful book. It was often described to me as a very pessimistic book, describing the worst cases of the nature of history, and that everything was going down the tubes, and that the best thing that could happen for us is that we would all be taken out of here. And so I actually came into the book as a scholar because my tradition told me that that was really not the best way of looking at the book, that it was a hopeful book, as Mitch was describing. And I found that to be true as I studied it for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, you know, as both as an ecumenical leader or worker, and to see the different ways that it has been utilized throughout history, and or even recently. I mean, you have like Hal Lindsey, and that came out in what, like the 70s. So yeah. Even that's dated. So you have Hal Lindsey, and you have LaHaye and Jenkins. That even came out 20 years ago, I think. So we're dealing with a very popular mindset around the book of Revelation. It's kind of taken on a different kind of. There's been movies written about it. Or done about it. There's been all kinds of popular understandings of it. Coming from as a theologian, though, the idea is that Revelation is less about like this sensationalistic kind of approach. It's a way of kind of comprehending what the powers and principalities are like within a particular social milieu, I think, and that social milieu has to be dictated by the Roman occupation and the church's relationship to the powers at the time within its context. Is that correct, Mitchell?
Yeah, I think the best way for someone to get an understanding of the book of Revelation is to understand it in its first century context. As you indicated, this is a writing that was addressed to people who were living in the first century in the Roman Empire. It's a book dealing with their problems and their concerns. That's clearly evident from the chapters 2 and 3 with those messages to the 7 churches. John, the author of the book, is very much trying to help them deal with their current situation. The book still speaks to us today in our current situation, however, because even though the situation has changed, a lot of the same type problems that people in the first century were dealing with are still problems that we are dealing with today. So it is a book that's rooted in the first century, addressed to first century people, but its message is timeless. And so it becomes a message that still speaks to us if we read it properly and understand it properly.
And that kind of it speaks to the way that you approached your commentary, Rich, which was you even credit Mitchell's commentary within your commentary, saying that it was a like you can tell by the size of Mitchell's commentary that you have amazing resources in there, Mitchell. It is just a really it is a gem of a commentary. So if
Thank you.
anyone's really looking at trying to do like a like picture things or to see how things looked, Mitchell took a lot of photos and put them into his commentary, along with a lot of maps and figures and other kinds of things, which is absolutely fascinating to me. And I think a lot of people would use it as a resource in Sunday schools or in other places where these things come up, where you can actually picture like the what the signs and the seals and how artistry was used and other kinds. And I think even iconography was used in your book, if I remember right. So this is great. But Rich, you kind of took a different approach to your commentary, and it was like a blending between what you thought was like high scholarship, which you credited Mitchell's as being, and then some of the popular stuff that came out through like Jockey Lewell and William Stringfellow. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess because my background really is systematic theology. I saw the book. A friend of mine once said that most of the Bible writing is more like country western music, and the book of Revelation is like jazz. And I think that artistic, linguistic criticism is a very important tool for understanding the book. It's not so linear as it is a very active text with a lot of imagery and almost like a movie as opposed to even a still picture. But I think Mitchell's commentary, because he does take very seriously the artistic features of the text, I think, as you're describing, has a lot of good resources for that. Because, yeah, I mean, you almost have to be so immersed in the Old Testament, the wisdom tradition, the prophetic tradition. Certainly, the writer had all of this at his disposal when he was putting together this beautiful image of the nature of history and the cosmological grace of God in the world. And so, yeah, it does allow for us a lot of use of our imagination, a controlled imagination. And for that reason, my commentary tended to be more of a theological exposition on big themes in the text, as opposed to real detailed exegetical features.
And I thought, yeah, go on, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say the comment about the creative and artistic part of the book of Revelation. One of my comments often is that I think Walt Disney missed a great opportunity with the book of Revelation, because when I read the book of Revelation, I often think of the older Disney movie Fantasia, with all the sights and sounds, and even the imagery that is in the book of Revelation, where you've really, so much of the book is trying to depict the struggle between good and evil. And if you look at what happens in many of the classic Walt Disney cartoon movies, where you have evil being portrayed as monstrous beasts coming out of the abyss or the sea, right. That's really what John is doing through this book. So if people can learn to read the book with imagination, hearing the sounds, smelling the smells in the book, seeing the sights, and as you mentioned, it's not linear. One way the book has often been described is it's more like a symphony, where you play one theme and then come back and pick up the same theme and play it again a different way. So John keeps hitting you over and over again with these different images.
Now, one of the similarities that is between the two of you, that you probably don't know this, but has been that both of you teach Sunday school classes.
Yes.
And you Mitchell even credit your Sunday school class as being a part of your writing of the book. And Rich, you've taught Revelation in a Sunday school class as well. So as you're teaching this, have you what kind of reaction have people given to you, like on a popular level? I'm not just talking about your academic work, but when you're teaching this to like an engineer or even somebody who works at McDonald's. I mean, what kind of reaction have you gotten on when you've taught it on that level?
I could describe a different context. I get different reactions. I've had Sunday school classes where people are eager to look at things in a different way and try to use the methods that I'm using to try to see it in a different way. And then I've been in classes where they've already got their mind made up about the schema of the end of days, and they get a little antsy when they don't find everything in there the way they thought it was going to happen. I've sometimes asked the class, now, when we get to the rapture, let me know when you see that. And many of them, we get to the end of the book and they realize, hey, I didn't see the rapture. Generally because they got that material either from another book somewhere, or they got it from Thessalonians or some other places in Scripture. But yeah, they're rather alarmed to find out that some of the schemas that they've been taught aren't really overlaid on the text if they just let the text speak. So yeah, I've had various responses, but because I do take a certain approach to it, I'm always aware that there's another person teaching in the class
that's not even there. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. So Mitchell, how about you?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, that I do teach an adult Bible study class. I've taught the book of Revelation in that class several years back. And as so happens, we're right now working back through it again because several of them want to know if we could look at it again, which I think is a part of the power of the book of Revelation. Even those who have worked through it, there's still something attractive about the book. I would say at this point, most of the people in my class have been with me for years, so there's not any surprise to the approach I take to it. But Rich's comment about people often being surprised about what's not in the book is part of the experience I've had as well. In a course that I taught to undergraduate students at university, it was a course on apocalyptic literature. And after we had dealt with the book of Revelation, I gave them a writing assignment. And one of the students' comments on her writing assignment was, I was surprised what wasn't in the book of Revelation that I'd always been told was in there. But when I read it, it wasn't there. So that's one of the benefits of having people read it for themselves, that all the charts and timetables and schemas that people have worked out, someone who reads the book for themselves often realizes that has been imposed on the text, and that's not what's going on in the book itself.
Well, one of the images from popular movies that kind of comes up is the tribulation force, where you have these holy people that are armed with M16s that are doing battle with the forces of the beast, and that comes directly from LaHaye and Jenkins. It's not even like a misappropriation of what they do. One of the things that I find when I'm reading through the book of Revelation is just really how nonviolent it is, except for the violence that's perpetrated upon the people of faith. And they're laying, like in the one image that comes to me is the people under the altar when they're crying out, how long will this take place? And how long will we suffer? And that to me is it's like a prayer, how long? And it brings back to me memories of like Habakkuk, who asks the same question, like you were saying earlier, Rich, where it brings back the idea that how long shall we suffer from violence, and how long will you let this happen? And then I get toward the end and it says, and now, you act, and now God acts. And it's not because we've picked up M16s or we've tried to make something of the prophecy come true, but that we've succumbed to the providence and the care of God, and we've seen that come through in that way. I don't know if this is as much of a comment as it, or a question as it is a comment. We just don't get that these days. We want to pick it up and make it come true instead of allowing it to be something that unfolds. So what's the and the more I read through popular understandings of Revelation, that's what I see coming from, especially from people who are into the prosperity theologies or other types of theology, which are more directive, I guess is the word for it, where people are trying to actually make a prophecy come true. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, one of my favorite parts of the book is in chapter 21. After we've gone through all of the struggles of history, Babylon has fallen, and the new heaven and the new earth is emerging, that we see God on the throne saying something like, look at this, I'm making everything new. It's like it's the culmination of where this is all heading, and it's almost like God himself is gleeful at what he's accomplished. And there's Mitchell's hope. I mean, to me, whatever we're involved in, tribulation, struggle, in the end, God gets the final word, and he gets the glory for what is accomplished. So yeah, I view it as leading to that culmination of a new heaven and a new earth coming out of the struggle of this one. It's not the idea that this one is somehow wiped clean and a new one has replaced it. It is, he's making new out of everything. And that there is a hope that we, I think, all need today.
My comment on the book of Revelation, often when I begin it, teaching it with a new group, is to say, if you read the book of Revelation and understand it properly, when you get to the end, you don't know anything more about the future than you did when you began reading it, other than the strong confidence that the writer has that ultimately good wins out over evil, and God is there at the end as well as through the whole process. So any attempts to try and read individual predictions and prophecies in that sense are a distortion of what the book is about, and is to misunderstand rather than really understand what John is doing. I think John is using all of that imagery and that language simply as a way to offer hope. I think, to be fair, we also have to recognize that the book is not all hope. The book also has a strong word of warning, not just to people outside the church, but John's strongest words of warning are to the church itself, to make sure that people are remaining faithful to God. And if you look in chapters 2 and 3, there are some very strong words directed to the churches there.
Now, as we sum up our program, I know it's hard to fit this much scholarship into 26 minutes, but what kind of way would Revelation help us interpret what we're going through right now?
Well, one of the major things that John is trying to do is give his readers a different worldview, to help them recognize that the powers that be, whether those are economic, military, political, whatever the powers are that think they are in control, are not ultimately in control. That for John's strong belief is that God is the one who's ultimately in control. And I think the reason that people turn to apocalyptic literature, such as the Book of Revelation, in times of crisis, is that overarching theme and message that is there. So I think it is not at all unexpected that people turn to the Book of Revelation, even during the kind of situation in which we find ourselves now, when people are looking for some stability and hope.
Yeah, I affirm everything that Mitchell said. And in a day when people look to conspiracy theories to try to make sense of the confusion of what's happening, Revelation is like an alternative, holy conspiracy theory that gives an underlying answer to the strangeness of these historical events.
My feeling, and I'm right there with both of you, Mitchell. I couldn't have said it any better than that. That was incredibly beautiful. My thinking as far as this is concerned, I always go back to Revelation 18, where all of our world is like thrown apart. All the value systems and everything have been torn apart, but yet somehow, and this is the beauty of it, is that in spite of all of the things that we go through, God still says, I can make something hopeful and good out of this. Right. And today, I think we can experience the greatness of that. So I can't say how thankful I am to both of you and how much I was looking forward to this conversation to both of you, because I admire both of your work. I admire you both personally. Mitchell, I know that you're a Baptist, but I have had a beer with you. And Rich, just everything that I've come to love and admire about you has been there. And so I want to thank you both for being on Encounter, and for all of our guests. I want to, or all the people that are watching, I want to thank you for being a part of this. Be good and gentle to each other. Have a great day.